Hey Garth, welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jason. It's great. It is great to be back on the show.
We got a special episode today for lots of
Yeah,
reasons. One, it doesn't fall into our regular pattern, and
yeah,
we've got a very special guest who works out at UBC. He's come in from the Americas and
yeah,
United States of America to be specific, and he's with us. But before we get going,
yeah.
I got a kind of a personal question for you. How are you, Garth, with loose ends? Can you like? Do all ends have to be tied up for you? Are you okay with loose ends? Like, what? How do you feel about loose ends?
It depends on the context. When it comes to like calendars and stuff like that, I get a little
Hmm.
itchy if there's like I don't know what I'm doing. I like
Hmm.
like over the long weekend or over like special holidays and stuff like that. But I think on the whole, I like to think I can embrace ambiguity really well.
Hmm.
Yeah. What about you,
I,
Jason?
I think I embrace it quite well most of the time. I think it's personal and professional is different. Personal loose
Yeah.
ends don't work so well. Professional, I'm more okay with that because I don't. Maybe it's just the nature of my role. I don't know, but I think this is
I
an
think
important conversation.
Yeah, and Leonard Cohen, right? Cracks. That's
Hmm.
how you let the light get in. I think sometimes, and we've talked about this with other people on the show. When you can hold space for ambiguity, that's where people feel welcome and like, oh, I
Hmm.
can contribute more ideas as opposed to rushing to decisions. But when it comes to loose ends, um, yeah, I think I'm pretty good with those.
Well, okay. So today's guest talks about trauma informed leadership and care. And we
Hmm.
talk a little bit about psychological safety,
Yeah.
obviously, as being an important part of this, and authenticity. And I think as we get to the end of the podcast, we talk about loose ends in leadership as well, and how do we resolve that in our own mind, whether it's got to do with trauma or just a kinder, more compassionate way to lead. Like, how far can our kindness be extended before it runs out? So I
Oh,
bring it
that's
up because it's
interesting.
a really interesting conversation about all of those topics and how they come together. And I suspect there's more than one loose end in this podcast, which we're going to have to track down.
So, listeners, I hope you enjoy this show. Adam's a great guest, talking about caring campuses, talking about making your work meaningful and full of purpose. And he brings in some really great research to support his work. So, hope you enjoy.
Enjoy the show.
Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow.
Honored. Hey, folks, welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. Today, we are taking a pause from our Beers Book Club. And the reason we're doing that is we're going to spotlight a leader whose work is helping reshape campus culture. And we thought, what a great time to turn things from sort of theoretical into practical advice. And we've got some great questions lined up for Dr. Adam Jussell, the new Managing Director of Student Affairs at University of British Columbia.
All right, Adam, welcome to Canada. Welcome to the podcast. It is nice to have you here. Adam, for those of you who don't know, brings 13 years of experience from his time at UWN. Trauma-informed care is what he was looking into there. And I think it's really important that, we're looking into that on this podcast, as it's an important part of leadership, honestly. And we have listeners who are in the business field. We've got people in K to 12. And we've got lots of folks in the post-secondary area who are listening to this podcast. So I think a lot of what Adam is going to bring to this will be transferable across many industries.
Yeah,
Adam served. Go ahead, Garth. Yeah.
no, you go ahead.
No. Adam served as Dean of Students at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where he built the Campus Cares framework, emphasizing trauma-informed campus culture.
Yeah, and actually, he's done a lot more than that, because prior to that, he was the Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Student Conduct at Washington State University, right? Dean of Students and Student Conduct. So lots of interesting things here. And he served as the Assistant Attorney General representing WSU. So he brings like a really cool lens to students, how they interact on campus, and how that impacts culture.
And in mid-July 2025, he started at UBC right here in Canada as Managing Director of Student Affairs. Before we mess anything else up, Adam, do you want to take a second and, like we do with all of our guests, take a moment and introduce yourself to all of our listeners? Thanks for being here, Adam.
Thanks, y'all, for having me, and just extend great gratitude for both of you teeing me up there. And I'll just give a little bit of just off the resume how I got here, because I think it's kind of like most people in life, I ping-ponged my way to Vancouver, BC. And so I originally started my career as an attorney. So I was a practicing attorney, first at a private firm, and then in the public sector in the state of Washington. And like a lot of folks, had kind of a crisis conflict at the end of my legal graduate education, where I thought, I'm not sure I want to be a lawyer. I'm not actually clear what being a lawyer means, even as I sit here right now. But didn't have any lawyers in the family, just did it on a lark, but really had a passion that was born out of working as a resident advisor in college, of working with and alongside college students. And that was partially born out because I saw the impact that, and this is true, probably y'all's experiences, one leader can make on others, and wanted to do that with college students. So really struggled mightily to get back into the field, but got back into higher ed first as an attorney, and then eventually moving over to the administrative side. So I kind of have this interesting lens to the work that is born out of that education. But originally from the Pacific Northwest in the US, and wanted to make a run at something exciting and different. So we picked up and moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And my joke with Milwaukee is we thought we'd be there for 2 years and then move back to Washington or Idaho and Oregon, and really found a home there. And so stuck around for 7 years. And then this job came open at UBC, and it's been a month, so I got it all figured out by now. And really enjoyed my time here thus far. And this podcast finds me in a very transitory space, which is a lovely time to be reflective about the work I'm doing and what is going to go forward. So anyways, that's a little bit about me off the books, about who Adam is off the resume. I like to joke is that I'm just a bit of an awkward nerd, and a geek, and trying to find as I get older to lean into that space a little bit more. So that's a little bit about me and who I am and why I'm here. You might ask, how did I get on the podcast?
Yes, this is what we want to know. Why are you here? Why are you our guest, Adam?
Yeah. I'll say two things. One is I rewatched Ted Lasso as a balm to a very stressful time in my life. So and was like, hey, there's a lot of really good leadership lessons in here. I wonder if anybody's ever done a podcast about it. Sure enough, landed on your doorstep. And I think through some conversations I've been fortunate to have with Jason along the way, got an opportunity to come on and join you all and talk about the work and talk about my own leadership journey, which is, of course, a work in progress. So I'm here today to talk about all the things I'm learning and have learned and have screwed up in my leadership journey, and a little bit about the research that I did at UWM. Was fortunate to do at UWM.
Awesome. Adam, thanks for that. Thanks for that intro. Thanks
Amazing.
for explaining why you're here. And thanks for clicking on our podcast, because I know there's like tons of other podcasts out there. So appreciate that. So let's jump in. Adam, your research revealed some really interesting figures. 36% of faculty and staff screened positive for post-traumatic stress symptoms during the pandemic, and 40% experienced extreme or near extreme stress. So take us inside these numbers. Like, what does this all mean?
Yeah. So those numbers, when you just read them, and even as I hear them again for the 1,000th time, they seem shockingly high, right? Mm-hmm. They these are folks that have, and at least in the US, they have work provided healthcare. They have a regular income, and they have some of the traditional supports that you would think buttress against the stress of such a significant event. But what this tells me, at least initially, is that, gosh, all of the stress of the pandemic crested all of those supports and resulted in this really salient and significant event for a lot of folks. I also like to say that screening positive using the tool that we use in our research does not mean that someone actually had post-traumatic stress disorder. It would just mean that there would be further follow-up from a clinician to actually see if that's what they had. But even using the screening tool, we had a hypothesis that maybe that number would be in the 10, 15% because it is a significant. And then you look at it, and we looked back at the data again, and that is high. I think the second thing that I'll highlight is some of the important work around this is just building awareness about folks' experience, both during the pandemic, but also these are caregiver-based roles. These are folks that are oftentimes coming into work with a servant-oriented, including myself, focus on life. And you all know, if you're a leader and you care and you kind of sell out on serving others, there's a point where that can actually impact yourself, impact your own well-being. So if you're going above and beyond and actually stressing yourself out to the point where you're not doing your service well, your team well, this showed us that, hey, the folks that we see as being leaders in our field are actually really stressed out. And so it begs the question, what are we doing to care for them? What does that mean? And I don't know, there's this an often cited thing in higher education, student affairs especially, is we're here for the students, we're here for the students, we're here for the students, which is true. But I do a classic yes and to that is, how can we really be there for our students if we're not ourselves showing up and being there for ourselves and our team? I try to frame it in a performance mindset. I'm a recovering athlete, and so I think, well, we can't perform at a high level for our students if we're not doing the things that take care of ourselves. And the second part of the research really focused on what are those protective factors? What are the things that communities and organizations can do to protect against this type of thing? Post-traumatic stress. And that's where the trauma-informed care work really was born out of at UWM. So that's a lot of kind of high level about the data and what it shows. But I think the biggest thing is that we were trying to paint a picture of this is a very stressful moment. And I would venture a guess that even though this was done during the pandemic, that trend has either remained the same or continued, notwithstanding the fact that the pandemic, or at least its zenith, is long past us. So that's a little bit about where we started.
Adam, I've got two follow-up questions.
Yeah.
I loved your analogy that these symptoms, like you said, COVID crested over the sport. And that's like, water over a dam, or that's the imagery that I'm using here.
Yeah.
And that you were surprised that it was so high. Couple that with what the challenges are. Sorry, not what the challenges are. The supports are. So when you say it crested over the supports, what are you talking about? Are you talking about supports available to them, or are you talking about the internal supports that we have?
Yes. So I think the first, it's a great question. The first thing is to think about what are the things in our daily lives, and this is just from our experience, that protect us against stress. If you wrote those all down right now, it's my guess that those would align with trauma-informed care research, which is some big ones. Feeling empowered and like I have agency in my life. Well, that's a big component of mitigating stress. Feeling like I have a strong social support network. That's number one. I tell that to students all the time. If you have a friend or someone you can turn to in the time of crisis or stress, that's such a big protective factor against trauma or stress. So I think there's those pieces which can somewhat be internal and external. And then there's the external pieces, which I kind of think are a great augment to the internal stuff. but they're not a panacea. And those are like, do we have meditation practices that are available to folks? Do we encourage folks to practice self-care and model it? Do we tell folks what does the research show that are mitigators against stress? But I say the yes and because we got a lot of critique when we were doing workshops during the pandemic, telling folks, go take care of yourselves, take a break, take an hour away to go for a walk. And people were saying in our workshops, I don't feel like I have a second to step away from my computer because I'm taking care of my household, I'm parenting my kids, and I'm responding to students that have COVID and need, interventions of some sort. And so how do you tell someone to practice self-care while they're feeling that stress? And so we had to kind of shift our intervention model a little bit to focus on those internal pieces you identified, Garth. So I think it's a both. One is not good without the other.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Now, Adam, this is so rich, and I want to get into kind of a leader's mindset here for a minute. And I have a couple of questions in this space. You've identified key risk factors like caregiver responsibility, socialization. These things are around the pandemic, and I agree with you. I think the long tail of the pandemic hasn't resolved much of our, stress at work, our workplace wellness, if you will. And there's mitigating factors, including social support, time outdoors, pets, physical activity, meaningful work, sense of purpose, so on and so forth. I mean, if you were to sit and talk to a leader of a, higher education or a K-12 education system, and you're going to give them your best advice on how to respond to these risk factors, what would the best advice you could give to a school leader? You're talking to two of them right here who, we're surrounded by folks who are really focused on wellness, and so are we, but we don't always have the answers as to how to support them. So, Adam, how do we support those people in our care?
It's a great question, and I think y'all do a lot of this already, or at least you model it through what I've heard and read about the work that you do. So I'll pick on both of you in this space as well, because I think it's a good vignette into what really works, what the research show works. The first thing, as you were asking that question, the first thing that jumped to my mind was the idea of authentic leadership. And a lot of what we heard in the pandemic is having someone transparently say, I'm in the thick of it too, I'm stressed, and here are the headwinds that we are facing. I'm so surprised how many people walked away from that, even if the headwinds were existentially challenging, going, oh, that actually reduced my stress significantly. Mm-hmm. And so I think we talk a lot about authentic leadership. I think it's okay to say, I'm in the suck. I am stressed myself, and not feel like you have to know all the answers. One thing stuck out to me. We did these, a lot of campuses did them in the States, these town halls with our campus, where it was kind of a Q&A with senior leadership. And we did some follow-up research with some of the attendees and asked the question, how did this feel? And pretty significantly, folks pointed out, we had one of our financial VPs spoke and said, I'm just going to be straight with you all. Here are the numbers, and here's how we're responding to them, and here are the unknowns. And people walked away going, oh, I feel so relieved. Mm-hmm. It's
huge.
So I think authenticity, and you all model this, and I try to model it as well, is be vulnerable about the space you're in. And then that in turn creates the second thing, which is psychological safety. Mm-hmm. The ability for folks to come forward and say, here's my stress points, here's what I'm feeling, have a trusted place to turn to when they are feeling that way. It increases performance, it mitigates harm, all of the good things. So fostering that is really important, and authenticity and trust can do that. The final thing I'll add, two final things I'll add there is trying to figure out how to foster meaningful work. We did a follow-up research study asking, we found this little piece in our first study that was individuals identified having a values orientation that was aligned with the work that they were doing as a mitigator to stress and possibly trauma. And that's kind of it seems logical as I'm sitting here saying it. I'm like, yeah, duh. But the research was not out there that we could find that actually said, here's a protective factor against stress. And we use meaningful work broadly. It does not mean that I have to come in and go, I find meaning in sending emails today. It is more, what is the motivating factor between me and my day-to-day activity? So that could be, this makes me enough money to send my kids to a decent school, or it makes enough money that I can go on a vacation, or heck, it's enough money that food, shelter, the basics, or it's, I really like serving college students, and that is an important values additive to me. So fostering that, creating space for conversations. I try to do this now with my team, is ask them, why are you here? You could do a lot of things, but you're obviously here. Tell me why. And then using that as a tool later on.
So Garth, before you jump in, because I know you've got a question, I can read it on you, but I just want to say, Adam, that really resonated so deeply for me. We had about 6 years ago, we had a couple of real tragedies in the school here. And I remember working with a trauma counselor, and she came in, I said, Sue, what do I do now? Like, I had no idea even where to start. And she said, you walk in there, you be authentic, you be vulnerable, and you say to everybody, this might be your worst day at work. Yep. And it's probably going to be my worst day at work. And like, that's how you start. And I remember thinking to myself, that's not how I would have thought to start, but Sue really coached me to level of saying, like, this is going to be bad. Like, and we're all in it together. And I think the second thing you said really resonated, reminds me of a book called Love and Work by Marcus Buckingham. I don't know if you've come across it or not, but he talks extensively about this idea of the red thread of purpose and finding that thread that's, value aligned, all these sorts of things as a bit of a buffer to support you through stressful and difficult times. And just really, really hits home for me. Garth, thanks for letting me jump in there.
No, it's great. And as a listener, Adam, you'll know we love the work of Dr. Bell Liang and Tim Klein. And they talk a lot about this purpose mindset, which is a huge buffer for well-being. And, I think it's in the leader's sort of own art form. How do you remind people about the work that they're doing, like their deep core why? Tell us a little bit about the caring, like the Campus Cares ethos. Like, many people are aspiring to build this. What does that look like, sound like, and feel like on the ground, Adam?
Yeah. I have to laugh here because I don't know if this is your experience, but sometimes in higher ed we trip over ourselves a little bit to form committee after committee after committee, and the joy, or at least part of my joy of this work, was it was all started without any type of top-down directive. It was, and I'm trying to not oversimplify it, but it really is this simple: is 20 or 30 people got together in a room and said, what does it mean like to create a caring campus? And we threw it up all on a whiteboard, and then we actioned around it. And we kept doing that over and over and over again until it got sticky and had some salience within the campus university community, and hopefully persists beyond me leaving. Because I was trying to buttress against, this is an Adam thing versus this other campus thing. So all told, we probably by the end had 150, 160 people involved in the program. And when I say involved, I mean they're just showing up in a room and going, hey, I think I have an interest in creating a Zen garden, experience. And what does that look like? Oh, you need to connect with these people, and let's create an action team, and off you go. The thing that I loved about it too, it was in general over 4 years, less than $4,000 cost American US dollar. It wasn't big programs. It wasn't, flashy speakers or anything it wasn't a giant book club. It was a lot of on the ground conversations and work. And one of the biggest successes I found is, the folks that normally you wouldn't see around the table having conversations that influence this culture were around the table. And so elevating people and elevating voices.
Yes.
I can point to you right now all the little toolkits and task items and stuff we did, but as I step away from it a little bit more and reflect on it, the biggest thing that I'm proud of is that it was engaging in that way that isn't traditional within educational circles, and it was done all without a mandate from campus.
So, Adam, let me ask you the critical question that every single one of our listeners is probably thinking right now. Whose permission did you get to strike this committee, to bring together people, to get ideas into action for under 4,000 USD?
Yeah. Nobody.
That is the answer. I love this, right? Like and I love your process, ideation to action, like do it until it sticks. And it's not something that's limited. You want to get more and more people. You just increase the gravity. It's kind of like the physical gravity around it. Man, congratulations. I hope it still continues to thrive, even though you've moved on. And I hope that you continue to do this at UBC. Like Jason, you and I have students who will graduate and go to UBC, right?
We have piles of kids at UBC, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, you tell them to come in my office and yell at me someday. Thank you so much, Garth. That's an amazing compliment, and I think one of the things that we played defense against was the kind of organizational desire to like want to make it look like everything else that we've done before. So acknowledging that when you do these type of grassroots initiatives, you have to be willing to play defense against that stuff, because I was so surprised how the machine just kind of was like, oh, we can, what's the assessment? What's the retention tool? What's the ROI? And I had to say, nope, that's not, we're doing something different here. We can point to it. And, so anyways, I'm hopeful that it has salience for people beyond the four walls of UWM, but I'm also hopeful that it sticks there because it was such a great team. It was one of the hardest things to leave behind was the amazing people I got to work with that really deeply cared about each other and the work.
So point us to the toolkit. Where would they find some more information about you, Adam, and your work?
Yeah, biggest thing is just to track me down on LinkedIn, which is about the most corporate speed I can throw out there right now. But find me on LinkedIn is where I keep trying to write and respond to some of this stuff. So and hopefully continue the work forward.
And Adam, it is absolutely worth a follow on you put up great content, and I know you're always open for a conversation. I know there's a lot of educational leaders out there who are dying to have conversations about, upstream solutions, downstream solutions, talking about wellness, talking about camps cares. All of these things are front of mind for all of us. Other questions about where does organizations stop and start when it comes to personal wellness, and what is our roles and responsibilities organizationally as leaders? I mean, these are all questions we can dig in for hours and hours. And I'm so excited to think about continuing this conversation on this podcast. But before we wrap up, Adam, we always have one question which we like to leave our listeners and our guests with, and it's back to Lasso. I mean, that's what kind of brought you to us and keeps this podcast going. What's your hot read on Ted? Was he a good leader, a bad leader? Was he lost? Was he found? Ted is a leader. What's your take?
Okay, so the most important question. So I'm. This is not the hot take, but I'm going to say yes eventually, and that is the moments where Ted was practicing that authenticity that is so valuable, in at least the research that we've done in the trauma-informed care space and the human-centered design world. It eventually, got there by the latter seasons, the latter arc of his story. My hot take and my question every time I watch the show is, what happens when Ted's kindness doesn't work? And I get it's a TV show and all that stuff, but like, what happens if Nate goes, no, thank you, not for me, doesn't come back around? I've really wrestled with that as a leader, is because sometimes you never get that full circle moment with somebody that you have friction with. And what do you do with that? And that's something that I think anybody who's on their leadership journey will have to wrestle with. So my answer, quick answer, yes, eventually, but that question will always remain in the back of my head. as an opportunity to think about.
Awesome. That's such a great way to finish, because like it's a gray area sometimes. You know, are you a great leader? Well, today I am. Like I'm trying. You know. So anyway, listen, Adam, this has been an amazing conversation. Like very informative. I love that you were sharing your vulnerability, like sharing your process, and we'll follow you for your tools as well. So thank you so much. You've given us a lot to reflect on. Like, how do we make our own campuses a caring campus? How do we go about doing that? Because, our schools are in the business of care. And so how do we do that in many different ways? So thank you so much for that. You're blending like so many different ideas, and I always like to have like a diagram as I write. So there's yours. And you can see whose permission did you ask? Like, I think that's a huge takeaway for me. So thank you so much, Adam. Thanks for coming on.
And Adam, for me, like I take away the importance of authenticity, whether it's trauma-informed leadership or otherwise. I hear that in what you're sharing. I mean, the strength of grassroots movements, it doesn't always have to be systematic or organizational change that we're looking at. Grassroots can really make a huge impact. And I think through that, we see, how to distribute leadership as well, which I think you've done magically here. I mean, you've run a bit of a leadership session here on this podcast. I think anybody's listening for those through lines. And I think the last thing I'd leave with is like, there are always loose ends in leadership, right? Like you said, like sometimes you're not going to get the full circle with Nate. Sometimes you're not going to win all the battles. And I think it just comes down to having this faith in the good, a kinder, more compassionate way to lead, like we've said so often on this podcast. And I think you've modeled that as well, Adam. So we really appreciate you being here with us today. And it's been really nice. So until next time, Adam, do you think you'd be able to take us home on this one?
Yeah, thank you both so much for the time. I'm incredibly grateful for you both and for this podcast. And until next time, keep leading the Lasso way.
All right.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody. So good. Thank you.
On that, Adam was great. Jason.
He was so good.
Adam was great. I can't get this imagery out of my mind when he said, all of our supports, they were crested by COVID, and that analogy really speaks to me. I can see the water cresting over the dam, over the sandbags, like all that stuff. And I think it's an analogy that might be worth listeners, especially those who are in positions of leadership, it might be worth exploring, because there's so much you can do with it, right? The water spills over. The water's not gone. How do you absorb the water? How do you deal with the water? How do you not let it become stagnant, turn into a swamp, like all those things? But also how do you turn all the pieces around trauma-informed practices into daily practices where we can shore up that dam ahead of time? And you've got one or two, right? Like you've got a practice. Like, we want to share one of the practices that you have.
Well, I think, this year we're talking about love and connection here at Rundle. And I think one of the practices is just finding a way to personally connect with as many people as you can. I think the biggest practice that I have in that area is just simply walking slowly. I think we may have talked about this before,
and I love
right? But it's like, that's a practice where it's like taking your time to really slowly connect with people, I think builds up that dam. And I think that's the point you're making, is we have to identify what are those things that constitute the dam, which are going to protect us 9 times out of 10 against that impending flood. But on occasion, it's going to be overrun. We're not going to see COVID coming. We're not going to see a tragedy, these sorts of things. And I think we have to come to terms with the fact that it can be overrun. What about you, Garth? What's constitutes your dam in your practice?
The one I always go back to is calendaring. Like, do we know what's coming up? How do we prepare ourselves? We in education, and obviously other businesses, but industries, but in education, we're so emotionally attached to our students, to each other, that knowing when those moments of high connection are coming, whether it's a parent event or whether it's the winter holiday concert or whatever, these are high moments of emotional output. And I think just being cognizant of them, being aware of them, drawing attention to them, I think is one of those protective factors. So,
Garth,
anyway,
I hate to. No. I'm not leaving this metaphor yet. I hate to overwork it, but I mean, as leaders, can we look at it as like that moment before the high tide or that moment before the influx? We draw down the reservoir a little bit to avoid running over the top of the dam. I think that is also an opportunity as we move into those high seasons. What are we doing in advance of those high seasons to bring down the weight? And I think it is a good metaphor, Garth.
Sometimes less is more.
That's true.
Sometimes less is more. I love it. But listen, this podcast has a lot of more in it. We've been going on a long time. So listeners, thanks for sticking with us.
Until next time.
Grab your coffee, grab your seat. It's time to learn, it's time to meet Garth and Jason, setting the tone. Leadership lessons to take back home. Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show with lessons from Ted.